The departure. Down on the beach, the world was dark. The sloping dunes were dark. The ragged rocks were dark. The black, foamy waves crashed onto the sand in darkness thick like fog. The only lights were celestial, speckling the nighttime sky like pinprick holes piercing an infinite sheet of black construction paper. These were the only lights, the white stars and the silver-dollar moon. Everything else was nearly invisible. Two silent figures stood facing the ocean, holding hands, listening to the waves and the wind. The man was tall, and the woman was shrinking by the minute until the man was holding the hand of a girl not half his height. The man felt wetness on his eyes, as trace notes of the piano bar music he'd heard an hour ago floated in his mind like buoys. They'd had dinner in one of those high-up restaurants with the golden windows. Now, down here on the beach, the restaurant lights were unseen behind the towering cliffs, and the warmth of the food they'd eaten had already left their stomachs. They wore sandals because the sand was so cold they would not have been able to endure it barefoot. And because the wind was also icy, they wrapped themselves in heavy wool blankets. The girl's was evergreen with a white snowflake pattern. Since she started shrinking, it was much too big for her. The bottom, sopping wet from the encroaching tide, dredged the sand like an anchor. Beneath it, she wore a black one-piece bathing suit with a single diagonal flare of bright blue connecting shoulder to hip. Despite the blanket, her arms and legs were frosted with goosebumps. The ocean must be brimming with life, thought the man, even on a cool February night in the Pacific Northwest. He thought of jellyfish luminescent in the blackness. He thought of the giant octopus and squid he imagined as a boy. He thought of underwater cities made of coral, of crustaceans, of whales bigger than freightliners. He also thought of the glowing fish scale fossil he saw as a boy at dusk, phosphorescent green, embedded in a large rock on the shores of the Atlantic, a mysterious sight that haunted him throughout his life. The girl was crying silently, heaving. The man looked down at her. A small girl now, a woman just an hour ago when he'd seen her looking for him in the restaurant. "Do you think there are any ships out there?" she asked, without looking up at him. Her voice was scratchy and faint from sobbing. Her curly mess of hair was black as licorice, a splash of moonlight caught in its tangle. In the restaurant, her hair was straight, flowing past her shoulders. Her lips shimmered with gloss. She stood beside the abandoned hostess post, radiant in her black dress, surveying the depths of the restaurant. He saw her, hands tight on her small black purse, which she held in front of her waistline. A few silver bracelets dangled from her slight wrist. He waved at her from the window table he reserved. The pianist was playing the song he requested for her. It was one she liked. Quietly he sang some of the words to himself. They did not say the things they needed to during dinner. He tried. It didn't work. So they talked about the lighthouse across the bay and what a neat job it would be to work there. He ate his swordfish and she ate her veal cutlet, and now it was too late to say what they were feeling. The man knew it. As soon as the appetizer arrived, he knew the gulf would not be breached. By dessert, he was sad inside. Only now on the beach was she realizing what had happened. Saying goodbye. When there are so many things under the surface lurking in the dark waters is never easy. How do you say a proper goodbye, honoring what was once a whole ocean and is now a fractured fossil? Questions bubble to the surface like fish nibbling at bits of floating food. What did I mean to you? Did you need me? What did your father do to you? Did you cheat? What happened in New Orleans? Memories, good and bad, looming like ships unseen. Tacoma, Silver Falls, the aquarium. Time as friends, time as lovers, riding the tractor twice at the pumpkin patch, flying my first kite on the beach. All the meals eaten, all the movies watched, all the bickering, the lies, the suspicion, the shifting moods, invisible serpents in the sea. Are they there? Are they real? She walked slowly over to the table. He stood. A passing waiter pulled the chair out for her. She hung her purse on the back and sat down. Immediately she unfolded her cloth napkin, placing it on her lap, and he did the same. "Good table," she said, looking out the window. "Oh, look it, you can see the lighthouse across the bay. How nice." She picked up her menu, taking on her serious, concentrated look when her eyes were unblinking and wide. The menus were large, black leather-bound, easy to hide behind. She tried to think of something to say, but when you get to an impasse, what can you do but build a raft? A raft he was now pulling down from behind the dunes, a rickety raft with gaps between the driftwood laths and threads coming loose from the rope. "No," she cried out, dropping the blanket at her feet. Yes, he told her firmly. He had to be firm with her. She frowned, an exaggerated frown, and wept like he'd never seen her weep before. He'd barely ever seen her cry, just once when she'd found out her aunt was sick. "No," she said again, but weak, defeated. The man eased one end of the raft into the choppy waters. "It's time," he said, and reached for her. "No, no," she screamed at him, screams deadened by the wind. She ran. He caught her, knocking her to the sand, pinning her. She flailed about like a fish on a pier. He picked her up and carried her to the raft. She kicked and screamed in his arms. Now she was only a baby, an infant unable to crawl. He laid her on the sand while he made a nest in the center of the raft with her blanket. When he was done, he placed her in it and kissed her once on her tawny forehead. "I love you," he said, tears dropping from his eyes onto her cheeks as she wailed. Then he got into the frigid water and pulled the raft with her on it out into the black ocean. He waited until it was too deep to touch the ocean floor. Then he swam out past the waves, pulling her with him, until he could see nothing at all. He let the waters carry her away, her sobs and squeals drowned out quickly by the wind and the waves as he made his way back to the shore. He dried off with his blanket, shivering, and turned to look for her. But of course she was too far away now. She was long gone. He slung his blanket over his shoulder and made his way up the dunes. When he reached the top, he turned once more, one last time. He listened to the waves lapping the sand and felt the wind tousle his hair. The lighthouse cut a single swath of golden light, which swept over the rippling waters just once and was gone.